Welcome to Friends at Work podcast, the podcast about friendship, work, and the interrelation of the two.
Hi there, this is Toye. This week I talked with an HR specialist, Kevin Berry. We had a very interesting conversation about the effect of the MeToo movement at work and workplace relationships in general. Kevin is such a thorough HR person that we didn't get too far into our conversation before he started sharing tips about time management and prioritizing your day as well. Here, listen. Welcome to Friends at Work podcast with Toye. I'm really excited about this episode. See, among other things, we'll be discussing the MeToo movement in the workplace. But first of all, who's Kevin Berry? Could you introduce yourself to us?
I am an HR professional. I've been in the HR industry for, I guess, about 8 years or so now, primarily in the software space, dealing with kind of small to mid-sized software groups in the D.C. metro area. I really had a great opportunity over the past few years to dive into HR, recruitment, talent acquisition, organizational development, design, so on and so forth. And I've been just fortunate to work with some exciting companies in doing that. Nice.
I'm just curious. You said you worked in the in the software development space.
Yeah.
So would you say that that's a unique environment, or is that like what you might consider like a standard environment for HR? I know HR functions in all of this, every organization, but is there a specialization for working in like the software space?
I think so. I can more or less just speak to my experience, but I find that the software space is a very fast-paced work environment. It tends to be pretty cutting edge. And in terms of employee relations and how you're, attracting talent and how you're managing staff internally, there's a lot of branding involved in it. It's a very, challenging space to work in. Again, just being fast-paced and the amount of noise that's out there and different avenues within the software space. There's a lot of competition out there, both in terms of products and your competitors out there in the market space, but also companies are competing for talent out there. And I think that, in other sidestep from kind of what we're here to talk about today, but there's obviously a talent shortage, when it comes to, the technical skill sets and the pace that it takes to be successful in this space. I would say it's a very unique environment. Every software company is a little bit different. I think particularly when you're working in more small to mid-sized groups, the pace seems to be picked up a little bit. Larger software groups, the talent gets spread out, the workload gets spread out a little bit more, but smaller groups tend to shoulder a lot more of that. And I've had the benefit of working with some software groups that are relatively small, 150, 200, 350 employee companies that are operating at the top of their industry. And to do that, it definitely requires a unique skill set. And, being able to go out there and attract the right talent to do that. And a lot of times it's not just the technical skill set, which is hard enough to find, but the culture fit and how well, the people are going to fit into the environment. Might be kind of counterculture as far as HR and recruitment professionals are concerned, but I always find the job description and the resume to be the most boring part of the process. To me, it's the dynamic that exists in a workplace and the dynamic that a person kind of brings to their job and the passion that they have for the job are more indicators of success than anything else. The job description and the resume tend to be the motions of the process. Of course, those are things that you have to do, but if you're just going to be a person that wants to go through the motions, fast-paced software industry is not going to be, in my opinion, the right place. I do find it to be very unique. A little bit long-winded explanation there.
No, that's fine.
I'm passionate about the space, and I think it's very unique, and in particular, how you're attracting talent and what you're doing and how you're competing, for that is definitely unique as well.
Awesome. So, as someone who's had some experience working in the software industry, do you share my opinion that certain personality types there's a particular personality type or a group of personality types that are attracted to that industry more than others?
Well, I believe so. I'll take a stab at it, and then you can redirect me if I'm a little bit off base.
Yeah, fine.
But yeah, but I do think that it takes a certain personality. Again, just to the pace of the environment in general, I think requires it takes a certain personality to adjust and to be successful in the space for one. But I also think within the software industry, and specifically, certain technologies and certain software companies, are I think even heightened a little bit more so. I worked in cybersecurity. I've worked and supported clients in kind of the healthcare space. Some software product companies, various software product companies within the DC market. But it's a software in general. I think very competitive, requires a certain personality. And then when it comes to certain niche groups, it takes a certain personality as well. And then to break it down even further, and this may be kind of more or less what you're getting to, each department requires certain personalities. The personalities that you're seeking for, your sales roles are going to be very different from what you might experience on the development side, and that might be very different from what you see on the operations or the finance team. So I think definitely, when it comes to certain skill sets, some roles tend to be a little, geared towards people that might be a little bit more introverted. Others may be more extroverted. So, it really depends on, less. I mean, to a certain degree within the industry, to a certain degree within certain segments of the software industry, depending on the industry that your software services. But I think even more importantly, when it comes to certain roles, there are certain personalities that you look for that are indicators of success for those roles more specifically. So I think that's where you start to see the dynamic and the personality traits really start to come through. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Once you touched on introvert, extrovert, I was like, yes, you hit the nail on the head. What I was trying to to talk about, which is because I tend to think that the software industry generally attracts people who are more introverted, generally, especially if you're a coder. And of course, you also expanded it very well by saying that if you are, say, in the sales aspect or you are customer facing, you definitely need to be more extrovert. But all the other things that go into it. So, thanks for that. So let's quickly look at this and say, what's your typical day like? Working as an HR specialist at your job.
Again, being in more of a smaller HR group, we have 3 people essentially in our group that support the 350 person company. That was just kind of the cybersecurity group that I was working with. I'm actually now more recently working with a company that's about 150 employees that is in the behavioral health software space. So small groups mean that you're shouldering a lot. In my more recent experience, I'm more on the talent acquisition and recruitment side. And then with the cybersecurity industry, I was more on the core HR side. So I dealt with benefits management, talent acquisition were my 2 primary roles there. And now more recently, more strictly in the talent acquisition area. But it's very fast paced. You have a lot and very demanding expectations that you need to really come to work and meet those expectations every day. For one, I don't view anyone that I've ever worked with that are coming to me with questions or needs or, whether it's overarching company goals or day-to-day needs or whatever it is. I want to be a support to whatever is going on there. And I feel like that's what HR in a lot of ways is. So I never look at anybody that's coming to me with a question, concern, or something that might be going on or challenges that we're facing that we need to be strategic about how we're tackling those. To me, those are my clients. So I have a very client-oriented approach to the work that I do. My coworkers, the staff that I support, the leadership that I interact with, the executive team, those are my clients. So, I like to be very open-minded with what's going on. So, but in light of that process, in light of that, kind of approach, you have to be very focused in the work that you're doing. You can't spend 3/4 of your week in your inbox. It's just not possible. You have a lot of process, goals and strategy and overarching things that you need to have time and attention towards. So I do have what I call a standard day. That's a strategy that we put in place where you kind of prioritize your tasks in order, and you kind of assign a grouping to them. So your kind of high priority, must-do projects that need to be done, the more immediate things, your more administrative tasks, checking emails, voicemails, following up with people, and then things that you're trying to get ahead of and be proactive on that you need to get ahead of. We know coming down the pipeline that we need to hire additional 10 sales individuals, or we know that somebody in a department's getting ready to retire or something like that. You can start being more proactive with how you're supporting the team through some of those transitions. So just depending on what's going on and how you're prioritizing your day and how you're really managing your tasks and the priority metrics that are kind of aligned with those is a big part of that. And so I kind of start my day with my administrative stuff, get in, check my emails for 15, 20, 30 minutes, voicemails, get caught up on that sort of stuff. Then I spend the next like 2 hours, pounding away at some projects that I'm working on, followed by, phone screens and interviews, and, followed by, benefits management and kind of, setting aside a couple of hours a day to have, an open door policy. So, hey, if you ever come by my office between 2 and 4, I'll drop what I'm doing for you. So just kind of have some standard office hours I find helps as well, because if you have people popping in at all times of the day, it can be distracted to the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Not to say that if someone stops in that you can't help them or anything like that, but to try to stick to a standard schedule, I think is helpful. Of course, you have to be malleable to the day, and if sometimes you show up to work and, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, but, then something more urgent gets dropped in your lap. So not to say that, are so rigid that you can't adjust and, reprioritize things, but I do think it's helpful to come in with some sort of a standard day and approach to how you're accomplishing your tasks and how you're moving things forward. And then I always say the most important part of your day is the preparation that you put into it the night before. So, at the end of every day, just kind of wrapping up everything that you need to do for that day and making sure that you've delivered on everything that needs to be delivered on, and you keep things going forward, and you're setting yourself up for success in the next day. To me, if I keep too much stuff spilling out from one day to the next, then I'm going to start getting behind. So I like to really stay on top of my tasks and really commit to getting certain things done on a day. If that means I have to come home and get the kids down and hop on the laptop for 2 or 3 hours to push out a report or to follow through on something, that's what's going to happen. Because I tend to think this is just me. Maybe I'm a little out there, but
no, I'm enjoying this. Go on, yeah.
But I like to keep the ball rolling. I always say you gotta want to enable the machine being the company and kind of your end goals and your products, and you don't want to be a kink in that. And if I'm holding something up, that means somebody else, isn't able to get to what they're able to do. And so I just always strive to, enable the machine, so to speak, and keep things moving. And I think that's evolved. Haven't always been that way, but just in my experience and the challenges I've had in my career, you kind of come through those, with a little bit more capacity to really, be a driving force in the strategy and just that, enable the company. The companies I work for, I've been fortunate, have really awesome missions behind them and, kind of what they're doing, whether it's cybersecurity, behavioral health, or, even, some of the other software companies that I've worked with. At the end of the day, there's clients at the other end of that. And if the software fails or is not doing well, then that's on us. And,
so it's bottom line a people issue.
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. So, you really got to bring it every day if you want to be competitive in the space. Because, if you get complacent and you think you made it to a certain level and, you can celebrate that and just kick your feet up on your desk. In the software space, you're here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because the second you get complacent, regardless of what department you're in, whether it's sales, development, HR, whatever, if you get complacent and get comfortable, you're going to be gone in a couple of years. Because someone's coming right behind you with something new and different technology. So that's where I think the software space is much different type of a beast.
It's definitely a rapidly changing environment. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's me. Again,
No. Go ahead. I mean, this is
yeah.
I. So I totally
Tend to be a
enjoyed.
little long.
Totally enjoyed a lot of things you talked about, and I thought they were all very meaningful, especially about how planning strategically to manage your time through the day. And I've kind of like gone away a bit from some of the things you talked about because I would like to say that I'm not aware of them, but I am. But there's certain things. Some of the most important things in life sometimes aren't the things that you don't know, but the things that you know that you once knew but are no longer practicing that you need to put to
Right.
practice, right? And
Sure.
so you're reminding me about some of those things again, and to get back on top of dealing, managing my time more effectively. And we've all got 24 hours, so you actually did. I feel like you did a quick time management seminar in the last 5 minutes or something. So yeah.
If you'd like me to go a different direction with that, we can certainly.
No, that's totally fine. One of the things that we've talked about what you do, really more on a superficial, or should I say, not necessarily superficial. That's not the word I'm looking for. More from a top-down level. So I'm looking more now at saying to you, Kevin, directly and saying your personal experience. Some, like you said, there are things that there's the ideal of how to work in a work environment and what to do, especially as an HR person. But I mean, life never works within the ideal. We always try to fit it within it, but it doesn't actually necessarily work within it. And a lot of people have come on my show and have talked about all the sometimes interesting, sometimes weird, sometimes borderline, disturbing relationships they've had with coworkers. Have you had any, encounter with a colleague that maybe has crossed some social policy boundaries that you think will be instructive, especially in the light of our discussion and having friends at work?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just fortunate. I can't really recall any really awkward, like anything over the top that was just outright like jaw dropping. Like, how did that just happen? Like, what are we doing here? I haven't had one of those moments. But I think to your point. And I may be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but it's not always the obvious things that you have to be that you need to be concerned about. To me, it's a lot of times the things that people are doing that they're unaware of, and those are I think there's a little bit of a difference there. If something is so overtly offensive, that's going to be dealt with. That's going to be handled. It's going to be very clear to everybody. But I think the more nuanced things that come up, I think, much more frequently are, working the software space and, and even, going out to, happy hours, things like that with coworkers. And we have, events and things that we do with partners of ours or clients of ours. And there, maybe an open bar and, things like that. You want to foster those personal relationships on a certain level because you're going to have to work together.
Yeah.
And if you feel comfortable with each other, on a personal level, that there can, of course, be a benefit to that on the professional side. But at the end of the day, I think it's always important to remember why you're there, what you're there for, and that's a company function. So try to keep things as professional as possible. So I do, I think just personally, I tend to operate a little bit more superficially and surface level because I try to respect those boundaries. But even to that point, I do have met coworkers that I do consider friends that I keep in touch with.
Yeah.
But it's just you want to keep those appropriate lines open. But the kind of coming back to one of the points I was trying to make, but didn't really hit home too much on is when you are out and you are people can become a little bit more comfortable than you would be if you're at a board table and discussing strategy and things like that.
Yeah.
At your hair and you kind of get a little bit more comfortable. And there can be times where a comment flies here and there. That, again, maybe not so overtly offensive, and I don't know, I have pretty thick skin at this point. Nothing, again, jaw-dropping. But I think those are the things that you have to really start to recognize, in light of the fact that everybody isn't on the same page as far as what may be funny versus offensive. And you have to kind of again maintain those professional courtesies, and I think keeping things a little bit more superficial is something that I would generally advise.
Okay.
When you're in a professional environment, keeping things above the neck, like that to me is just, I don't know if that's just how I was brought up or just a common sense thing, or being able to read people a certain way. You can kind of tell when people are offended by things, and you kind of be respectful. And again, I think I've just been fortunate in my experience and haven't had anything, again, jaw dropping. But I think it's some of those finer things that ultimately, if left unchecked, can become much bigger issues.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have found very instructive and interesting in general conversations about workplace friendships and working with different people from different cultures is that there is a difference in how workplace friendship plays out in certain countries than how it does in other countries. I found out in America generally the advice is basically what you gave, which is keep it superficial, and some people take it to the extreme. The attitude is, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here for business. And I've related with such people, and sometimes they come off as being unnecessarily just prickly, and they make working with them extra difficult. But I don't want to go too much into that, but I find that culture plays a role in how much of yourself you bring to work, and I know Sheryl Sandberg talked about bringing your whole self to work, whether that works because she is in a position of authority and people have to deal with her no matter what, or because I don't know how this will play out if somebody who was who's a subordinate brings the whole self to work, in the sense in which I understand that Cheryl talks about it, how that will be received. Because the other thing, though, is that most people spend most of their productive hours and most of their waking hours with their colleagues. And some people are lucky enough to have the same colleagues or essentially the same group of people, working with the same group of people for years, and they still keep it so superficial that it becomes, I think at some point, I find it, personally, I find the idea of that a little disturbing, but that's just my own opinion. But what do you, from what I've said, what do you think about this generally?
Yeah, and actually I agree with that. So yeah, maybe I went a little too hard on in my description there. I didn't mean to imply that you shouldn't bring your whole self to work. I actually 100% agree with that. I don't think you can be your best if you are not being your true self. And that's why I think it's so important to find something that you love to do, and that's something you can be yourself in. I think what I was trying to more separate was, the fact that some people can be inappropriate, cross some boundaries in being inappropriate.
Yeah. I understand that.
You get a little bit too comfortable. Not that you shouldn't be yourself. So good. So great that you brought up that point, and just to clarify that. But I 100% agree. And matter of fact, I think that those dynamics that are in play there and that drive that workplace culture are intrinsically important to how successful a company is going to be. I think for someone to be successful, I could not be successful if I didn't feel like I could be who I am at work. I need to feel comfortable. I need to feel supported. I need to know that I can, kick around some ideas. I may not be perfect all the time. I may have a goofy idea here and then, But I want to be able to kind of be vulnerable at work, in a certain regards, because I think that, again, when you're doing that and you're bringing your full self to work, that's that dynamic that I think is, again, really important. I touched on a little bit earlier, the dynamic that in the culture of a company versus the culture of a person, and what they're bringing to work, and how willing they are to connect with people is I think really important. Because if you're going to think strategically, there's not a textbook answer to everything that you're going to do, so you have to be able to work very well with the people that you're with. You have to feel comfortable doing that. I don't think you can have that without bringing your full self to work.
Huh.
That's a great point to make. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to kind of clarify that. But I 110% would agree with that.
Yeah.
You have to be your whole self.
As an HR specialist, I would like to hear your thoughts on the MeToo movement. But first of all, I will want to play you this Associated Press report, which was published, I believe, December 7, 2017. And afterwards, we'll discuss it.
Words are flooding social media.
I was really hesitant to post it.
Women across the country are identifying themselves as victims of sexual harassment or assault in the wake of Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein's downfall. Thousands posted the claims online using the simple phrase, "Me Too," following a call to action by actress Alyssa Milano.
The hope of this was that people would get an idea of the magnitude of how many. It's giving women the opportunity to come forward without having to go into detail about their story.
The hashtag was tweeted nearly 1 million times in 48 hours on Twitter, while thousands of Facebook users shared their stories of assault and harassment.
Working in service industries where men constantly make comments to you while you're working.
I come from a family with 6 women, and 4 of them have been raped.
I am floored by the number of women who have been made to feel unsafe and uncomfortable.
Milano says the idea struck her as a way to shift the Weinstein conversation to focus on victims. The disgraced film mogul has been accused by more than 36 women of harassment or abuse.
The fear of retaliation, I think, is at the heart of why many people opt not to come forward.
Sexual harassment lawyer Angela Reddock Wright says new laws and better training have improved workplace environments for women, but that more needs to be done.
We like to think in 2017 that things are better and that we've advanced. But these recent stories and the women coming forward to say, "Me too," it reminds us that we have a long way to go. And I'm not sure that just having policies and training is enough. It's really going to have to start at home.
While many are frustrated with the lack of discussion surrounding harassment,
No one talks about harassment in day-to-day. It's just pretty much accepted at this point.
It's shocking and eye-opening, and at the same time, not surprising.
many are hopeful that the Me Too conversation will help create change. Toye, Associated Press, Carson, California.
All right. So you heard that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is basically the like I played that to create a backdrop for the Me Too movement, and just to give more to bring it more to the fore what the conversation has been around this. And I especially knowing that you work in the software space, I know particularly a lot of stories have come out from California, from San Francisco, particularly for those who work in Silicon Valley, that it's pretty challenging in that environment where there's unfortunately a lot of sexual harassment. I mean, you could go online and Google and just find tons and tons and tons of stories. And but that said, because there are a lot of ways I want to look at this issue, I think I should just first of all let you comment about all the story we've heard and my comment, and just to hear from you, and then I'll bring some other thoughts into it.
It's disheartening to hear those stories. It's really a sad part of our society that we even have to have these discussions, and that we can't be more decent and respectful towards one another. particularly as someone that has a daughter, that think that she might experience some of those things as she grows up, and as she begins her professional career and really throughout her life, that she may experience those things, is a tough thought to have. There was one quote in there that said, you can have all the policies and trainings that you want, but it really has to start at home. And I may have misquoted that a little bit, but I think
that's the heart of it. Yeah, how I remember it too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Being in HR, to a lot of the points in there's trainings. There are, annual mandatory trainings that people go through. Clearly, that's not enough. A lot of the policies are more reactive than proactive. But I can say this, and again, this may be I've been fortunate to work with companies that really take this stuff serious. Anytime something has been brought up in 8 years, and it's been pretty few, but it's been dealt with swiftly. As in for instance, somebody being inappropriate at an after work event. They showed up the next day and they were asked to pack their stuff up and leave. It's just there's no place for it in the workplace.
Yeah.
But the statistics tell us for every one person that speaks up, there are a dozen more that aren't. And I think that's the bigger issue is, how do you really make people feel comfortable coming forward? And I will say 100%, it comes, there's not going to be some blanket magic wand type of a scenario that happens where some law is passed or HR, or a company, put some blanket cloak policy in and everything's all automatically eliminated. Life doesn't work that way. We have to be advocates for one another at work and speaking up for someone that may not feel comfortable doing it for themselves. If somebody is experiencing an issue, letting them know that they're not alone and they need to voice those opinions, those frustrations, doing it, in some cases for them if they're not willing to. There's some kind of confidentiality things that kind of come into play there, so that could be a little bit tricky. But we have to be advocates for one another at the end of the day. And if you're seeing something, if you're experiencing something, you have to speak up. If you are concerned that a manager or even the HR team or leadership is not going to take those concerns lightly, or not going to take those concerns seriously, invite a third party that you are comfortable with to those meetings. I would suggest not having those meetings one-on-one with anybody.
Yeah.
It could be manipulated. It could be misconstrued. And even if you have the best group in the world, bring a third party. Bring a coworker, someone that was present there. Take notes if you saw something. Write it down. HR professionals are taught. If somebody comes into your office and they have a story or something that they've experienced and they're sharing with you, we document it. We're going to take notes on that. And depending on what it is, of course, if it's more of like a coaching thing, again, not speaking to the MeToo stuff, because there's a zero tolerance for anybody that's acting out in those ways. But sometimes it's just a disagreement or somebody rubbing you the wrong way, from a personality standpoint, and there's some coachable things that happen there.
Yeah.
So we take notes, we document stuff. Be an advocate for yourself. Do those sorts of things. Be an advocate for others. We need to be more supportive of one another. Yeah. That's really the great thing I think about the MeToo movement is it's really swiftly just done wonders. It's really ugly to go through the process and see some of these people that you thought were just great people and just on top of the world come down and have these allegations and be in most cases guilty of the what they're being accused of. It just goes to show what our voices collectively can do and the impact that we can have. So we have to be greater advocates for ourselves. Again, no law or blanket policy or training is going to be enough because it's always going to go on. People take the trainings, people pass the trainings, still happen. So we have to be advocates for ourselves. That's my biggest thing. And it starts at home. I don't know. And this is something that I think we all have to look in the mirror at ourselves and say, how much do we want to help a particular cause?
Yes.
We all have our voting power. But outside of that, our community, how we're raising our kids, how we're teaching them to look for certain things, teaching our kids to stick up for people that, whether it's being bullied or being harassed or sexually assaulted, really being an advocate for people is, I think, something we just need to instill in our kids, and that will have an impact as well. But the area, again, I don't mean to sit here on a high horse as if I'm perfect and I do all these things all the time. There have been times, quite honestly, where I've been in a situation where I've heard somebody say something, and I'm like, man, like somebody should say something to them, and we should take that upon ourselves. Like, I should have said something. So we can't always wait for somebody else to do something. It's not somebody else's responsibility; it's our responsibility. And again, I'm not sitting here on a high horse as if I'm perfect in all those scenarios either. But we can all, I think, be more proactive as well. And we all have so many hours in our day, and life is busy. But at the end of the day, these things are really important to society, how we're evolving, and it takes time. Even this Me Too movement. I mean, some of these, just using Hollywood as an example, some of these actors, I mean, they speak up for women's rights, and here they are being accused of harassing, sexually assaulting people. And I almost, with some of the people that have kind of been in the news with this stuff, just think that they don't get it. Their ego is so inflated in a way that they don't even understand that it's actually harassment. It's not just like, wow, I'm this great person.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you want to have this relationship with me? Like, I feel like there are people that just don't understand they're even doing anything wrong, and that's those nuances that I think are more concerning than anything else.
I think the point here, and I totally get you. The point I see is that you see that the Harvey Weinstein situation was a watershed moment for the Me Too movement, right?
Yeah.
But and we do know that from what you've talked about, sexual harassment is immoral and frankly illegal in the United States.
Right.
But one of the things I'm beginning to see, and which is happening quickly, is that some people seem to be using this movement to push an agenda where there is there's almost no nuance. Almost everything is considered sexual harassment. I mean, it's like touching a member of the opposite gender on the elbow, for instance, could be considered sexual harassment. And it's getting to a point where now we're beginning to see potential backlash. Let me read a quote from you, from Ariana Huffington. She posted this on February 6th. This was a Twitter post for her. She said 3 times as many male managers are now uncomfortable mentoring women in the wake of Me Too. This is a huge step in the wrong direction. We need more men to mentor her. And she gave a link to leanin.org, mentor her, which is a reference to Sheryl Sandberg's movement and her book Lean In. And then just on February 8th, Christina Garcia, she's a female California lawmaker, and who was one of the people behind the Me Too push, was accused of groping a male staffer. Now, there's all sorts of stuff that's beginning to come out, and it feels like on one end of the spectrum, like in the middle ground of it, every sane person agrees that these things should not be happening in society, right? But on the extreme end of the spectrum, it's beginning to feel, at least to me and to a lot of commentators, it's beginning to feel like a witch hunt by certain individuals, where it's just like, in some organizations, and I sense this. I haven't seen it, but I sense it in talking to different professionals, or just when you keep hearing the same stories over and over, people, men are almost afraid to be in the same room with their female colleagues, just in case, so that they will not be accused of being, of harassing anybody sexually. And it's, how do we, and I don't know if you can speak to this, because this goes a little beyond the range of just as an HR professional within our organization, but how do we begin to try and bring those two extremes. The extreme that you talked about of one end, there are people who are being harassed who are not coming forward, and who need to speak up. But on the other end, the people who are just finding every excuse to accuse men, particularly. Of course, I give you an example of a man accusing a woman, but with this movement, it's particularly accusation of men. That you get to the point. How do we get that balance? Because it seems like these extremes, particularly the vocal extreme of that seems like a witch hunt, it has a tendency to derail this whole movement. And when people who are actually being hurt are not being hurt.
Yeah. So I don't mean to be controversial here, but I don't quite feel the same sentiment as Ariana.
Okay.
When it comes to that. And here's why. And this is kind of what I was talking about and trying to get to when I was talking about, keeping things a little bit more surface level, a little more superficial at the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, maybe it's not appropriate for you to rub your shoulder, to rub your coworker on the back. Maybe
no, I'm not. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not even saying that that's the thing. Go on.
Personal boundaries. Things like that.
Uh-huh.
So to that point, like if I work in a very heavily female dominated industry, I work with women all the time. I have no concern as to whether or not they may accuse me of sexual harassment or sexual assault, because I'm not doing that. I don't understand where people will be concerned about being accused of sexual assault if they're acting appropriately. Like, how is that a concern? I don't get it. If you're not somehow walking a fine line between appropriate versus inappropriate, then what's the concern? I don't know. So
okay.
I don't mean to be controversial.
No.
And
this is great because this is the kind of conversation I want us to have. So let me give you another example. So I have a friend. She's married. She's a hugger. It's just the personality type. Some people are just. I have friends who I've known for decades who just don't like to be touched. They just that's a personal. That's how they are. Yeah. And I have other friends who see you from afar. They're hugging you before they see you, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's not possible. I'm just saying that they just touchy-feely. It's just the natural state, right? Mm-hmm. The natural way of being. And this friend of mine, for instance, is one of those people. She's a tight hugger, but ever since the MeToo movement became mainstream, she's had to be less of herself at work to show solidarity to women who've been harassed, and also to protect her male colleagues from being accused of improper behavior, right? And even though there's been no reported sexual harassment at her job, like I said, no reported doesn't mean it hasn't happened, just means nobody has come forward. But what the Me Too movement the effect it has had on her work environment is has dampened the otherwise warm, non-suspicious work environment that she was used to. So as an HR specialist, how would you deal with this sort of situation?
Honestly, not to be controversial, and it's probably worth
be controversial if you have to be.
This is my opinion, and when it comes to things that are on the borderline, there are discussions. It's not one person making a decision or not. There's consensus on things. Mm-hmm. But my opinion is it was a good learning process for her to go through that and to understand that it's just because she may not feel great about the fact that she can't walk in and hug everybody does not make it a bad thing that she learned that not everybody is comfortable with that. Okay. And so I think it's a good lesson that she learned. I'm sorry that
that's fine.
Her feelings towards it were, negative. But the fact is we have a wonderful society that is diverse, and like you said, people that are big huggers and people that don't like to be touched. But just because someone doesn't like, just because someone likes to hug doesn't mean that it gives them a right to make someone else uncomfortable. And it is stuff like, where do you draw those lines? And to me, you just have to find a balance there. And it's something that you have to go through that evolution and learn. We don't wake up at 6 years old and understand what's appropriate versus not appropriate. Oh wait, it's not okay for me to tackle my friends in the hallway. Like you learn things as you grow up, and you don't get it right all the time. And it's okay to make mistakes. And to your point about some of these accusations and things that have happened that have really just taken people down. I think there have been people that have deservedly lost their jobs and everything like that. But I also think there are people and that are really monsters, in a very true form. But there are people that I think just didn't get what they were doing was wrong. So there's some teachable moments there. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be consequences or anything like that. But I think life is an ongoing lesson, and you have to kind of go through some of those awkward periods to learn what's appropriate and not appropriate. But you have to respect each other's space.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry for your friend, but yeah, I think that's a good lesson for her to learn, and hopefully she shouldn't take it too negative. I mean, that's just respecting your coworkers.
Yeah.
And respecting them as yeah, it's a balance. It's not always comfortable.
It makes sense. So, Valentine's Day. I mean, this will be published, after Valentine's, but we need to talk about Valentine's Day, and and I was reading earlier about some person commenting about workplace and Valentine's, and I wanted to hear your thoughts about what that kind of how is that how can that be a thing, especially with being in hypersensitive times, what are the do's and don'ts for celebrating or not celebrating Valentine's Day at the office?
Yeah. So you mean like there's coworkers that are dating, or just kind of like more general office festivities? Or
some people try to make it a general office festivity. And I don't want, we could go down a rabbit hole when we go down people who are dating, because there are, you start going to office policies and all whatnot. But just generally speaking, like what would be your advice to anyone who's thinking of, okay, it's Valentine's Day, show love to my colleagues, let's do something nice. What would that look like? Or not look like, or should they not do anything at all about it?
I think it's got to be workplace to workplace.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've ever worked somewhere that's done any office celebration on Valentine's Day. I do think that's probably a good thing, because if you are kind of dropping off your secret admirer notes to a coworker, I mean that does, I think, create some potentially unwanted advances. That being said, I mean, to some of the points you made, it's tough. We live in such a rigid environment now where you're afraid to do certain. It should just be more broader festivities, and not like what we did in grade school, where you're handing out Valentine's cards to everybody with like the what are the little candy hearts, or like hug me, or things like that.
Yeah. No, I
don't know.
It's a workplace. It's not grade school anymore, right?
Yeah. So I would say in general, I don't think I've ever worked somewhere that's done something for Valentine's Day. So there's not a whole lot of fireworks for that one. I apologize. Yeah, it's Valentine's Day.
No, that's fine.
But I think what they should do is maybe let their staff out a little bit early, so they can go enjoy Valentine's Day with their significant others. So maybe encouraging, more of that. That's a good question, though. I haven't actually thought about it. What would you do? What would your preference be?
So it's all over the place right now, because I honestly, it's pretty it's pretty hard to. I would not do anything. Let's just put it that way. My personality naturally might, be oh, let's do something nice for everybody. But as I've grown older and with more experience in life, you kind of get to the point where you realize that your intentions may not always be received as that. People always can interpret or misinterpret some of these things, and people come from different backgrounds. So, using your own words too, areas where it goes, down that could be gray. Just I leave those alone, because that's potentially a gray area now.
I would agree. It's tough for all the Valentines out there.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, not a lot of fireworks with that one. Get out of the office. Request to leave during the last hour of the day, an hour or two early. Get home. Do something nice with your significant other, whether it's going out or staying in. Yeah. I wish everyone the best on Valentine's, by the way.
Yeah.
Whoever has a Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to everybody.
Whatever that looks like.
On that note, Kevin Barry, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and hope to have you back some other time to discuss more on other HR-related issues on this podcast.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you having me. Nice chatting with you.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friends at Work podcast with Toye. What stood out to you the most in our conversation? Please share your thoughts with me via email or social media. You can connect with me on Twitter at Friends at Work US, and like the Facebook podcast page at Friends at Work Podcast. Also tell your friends and colleagues about this podcast. If you have a topic you want me to explore, or know someone interesting that I should talk to, or just want to say hello, please email me at myfriendtoye@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed listening, kindly give me a 5-star rating on iTunes. It will help new listeners discover the show faster. All the music in this podcast was produced by Austin Foster, and he works on his magic to make the production sound better. Thanks, Austin. Join us next time for another episode of Friends at Work podcast with Toye. Till then, keep smiling, help a stranger, lend a helping hand to a neighbor, and you may make life more endurable for others and yourself. Bye for now.